5 black belts, world champion in every major American martial arts tournament. Box office receipts in Asia that made Jean-Claude Van Damme's numbers look amateur, and techniques so precise that Steven Seagal's slow-motion Aikido demonstrations looked like a joke in comparison. Cynthia Rothrock had credentials that should have made her the biggest action star of the 1980s, but Hollywood gave her exactly 0 theatrical releases, 0 franchise opportunities, 0 respect. While men who'd learned basic kicks for a single audition were signing $20 million contracts and plastering their faces on movie posters worldwide, the most decorated female martial artist in history got shoved into direct-to-video releases that Blockbuster employees shelved in the back corner next to films nobody ever rented. This is the story of how an industry looked at championship-level perfection, compared it to mediocre men with the right anatomy, and chose mediocrity every single time. The greatest action star you were never supposed to know. Here's a question that should haunt every action movie fan. Why do you know every detail about Jean-Claude Van Damme's splits, Steven Seagal's ponytail, and Chuck Norris's roundhouse kick, but you've probably never heard of Cynthia Rothrock? It's not because she couldn't fight. At her peak in the mid-1980s, she held black belts in Tang Soo Do, Taekwondo, Eagle Claw, Wushu, and Northern Shaolin. 5 legitimate black belts earned through decades of training, not celebrity handouts. She won the World Karate Championships in Forms Division, not once, multiple years. 1981, 1982, 1983. She dominated weapons forms, breaking records with her kama, nunchaku, and sword work that judges had never seen executed at that level by anyone, male or female. Between 1981 and 1985, Cynthia Rothrock was rated the #1 forms competitor in the world by pretty much every major martial arts organization that mattered. Black Belt Magazine, Inside Kung Fu, all of them. She wasn't just the best female martial artist, she was the best, period. Then Hong Kong came calling, and for 5 glorious years, she became the biggest Western action star Asia had ever seen. Her films outperformed Hollywood imports. She fought alongside Michelle Yeoh before Michelle crossed over to James Bond. She worked with Sammo Hung, one of the 7 Little Fortunes, who trained with Jackie Chan. Directors built entire productions around her abilities. And then she came home to America expecting the career she'd earned. Hollywood looked at her resume, looked at her skills, looked at the box office receipts from overseas, and said, "We'll give you straight-to-video police thrillers where you play the partner." While Van Damme, who'd done splits in a leotard for gay adult films before Bloodsport, got Universal Pictures budgets. While Seagal, whose fight choreography required camera tricks and stunt doubles, got Warner Brothers contracts. While even third-tier male martial artists with a fraction of her credentials landed theatrical releases, Cynthia Rothrock got erased. The numbers don't lie. She made over 60 films. 60. Most people can't name 3. She's still training at 67 years old, still doing seminars, still inspiring the next generation. But mention her name to a random person on the street and you'll get blank stares. That's not an accident. That's a system working exactly as designed. Scranton to world champion. July 11th, 1957. Cynthia Rothrock was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, a working-class city where nobody grew up dreaming about becoming an international martial arts icon. Her childhood was normal. Middle-class family, regular school, nothing that screamed future action star. But at 13 years old, something clicked. She walked into a Tang Soo Do dojang and discovered the thing that would define her entire existence. Her first instructor saw something immediately. Most kids came to learn how to look cool or defend themselves from bullies. Rothrock showed up like she was training for war. Every kick had to be perfect. Every form had to be flawless. She'd stay after class ended, practicing in the corner while everyone else went home. The obsession was total. Within 2 years, she'd earned her black belt. At 15 years old, she was already competing in local tournaments, beating adults who'd been training twice as long. But here's where it gets interesting. Rothrock didn't just learn one style and call it done like most martial artists. She started cross-training at a time when that was almost unheard of. Traditional martial arts schools in the 1970s operated like cults. You learned their way or you got kicked out. Mixing styles was considered disrespectful, almost blasphemous. Rothrock didn't care. She studied Tang Soo Do for its kicks. She added Taekwondo for its speed. She learned Eagle Claw for its hand techniques, Wushu for its acrobatic flair, Northern Shaolin for its forms. 5 completely different disciplines, each requiring years of dedicated practice to master, and she mastered all of them. By the early 1980s, Rothrock was dominating every tournament she entered, not women's divisions, open divisions. She'd walk into competitions filled with male fighters and walk out with trophies that should have made her a household name in America. The martial arts community absolutely knew who she was. Magazine covers, feature articles, seminars packed with students wanting to learn from the champion. Inside that world, she was royalty. But outside of it, America barely noticed. Martial arts in the early 80s was still niche. The tournament circuit was respected, but it wasn't making anyone rich or famous. Rothrock worked as a teacher and personal trainer during the day, competed on weekends, and wondered if this was all her skills would ever amount to. Then in 1983, she attended a martial arts demonstration in New York. A producer from Hong Kong was in the audience, scouting for a movie he was putting together. He watched Rothrock perform a weapons form with double swords that left the crowd speechless. After the demonstration, he approached her with an offer that seemed too bizarre to be real. "Come to Hong Kong. Make a movie. We think American audiences are ready for a female action star, and you're the one who can do it." Rothrock thought he was joking. She was a tournament competitor and instructor, not an actress. She had no training, no experience, no connections, just skills. The producer didn't care. "We can teach you to act," he said. "We can't teach someone to move like you do." 6 months later, Cynthia Rothrock was on a plane to Hong Kong, stepping into a world that would make her a legend everywhere except the country she came from. Hong Kong makes her a legend. 1985. Cynthia Rothrock landed in Hong Kong with 1 suitcase and 0 idea what she'd gotten herself into. The film industry there operated like controlled chaos. 14-hour shooting days were normal. Stunt coordinators expected actors to do their own fights with minimal safety equipment. Directors changed scripts mid-scene based on whatever felt right in the moment. And here was this blonde-haired American woman who'd never been on a film set in her life, about to lead an action movie in a foreign country where she didn't speak the language. The movie was Yes, Madam, and it should have been a disaster. Instead, it became one of the highest-grossing Hong Kong films of 1985. Rothrock starred opposite Michelle Yeoh, who was also making her action debut. The chemistry between them was instant. 2 women who could actually fight, performing choreography that made most male action stars look clumsy by comparison. The fights in Yes, Madam weren't faked Hollywood punches with reaction shots. This was real martial arts, shot wide so audiences could see every technique, every kick, every throw executed with precision. Hong Kong audiences lost their minds. They'd seen Bruce Lee, they'd grown up on Jackie Chan. They knew what authentic martial arts looked like on screen, and Rothrock delivered it while doing something they'd never seen before. A Western woman fighting like she belonged in the Hong Kong action pantheon. The film's success wasn't a fluke or a curiosity. It was validation that skill transcended gender, nationality, and Hollywood's narrow imagination. What happened next should have been Rothrock's launching pad to global stardom. Instead, it became proof of how completely Hollywood misunderstood what they had. Hong Kong immediately signed her to more films. Righting Wrongs in 1986 paired her with Yuen Biao, one of the legendary 7 Little Fortunes, who'd trained alongside Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung since childhood. The film featured a fight scene in a shopping mall that film scholars still study for its choreography. Rothrock's character wasn't the sidekick or the love interest. She was the lead, fighting on equal footing with one of Hong Kong's most respected martial artists. Then came Millionaire's Express, also in 1986, directed by Sammo Hung himself. Sammo was, and still is, Hong Kong royalty. A director-actor-choreographer whose approval meant everything. He cast Rothrock not as a token Western presence, but as a legitimate action star, worthy of sharing screen time with Hong Kong's elite. The film was a comedy-action hybrid, and Rothrock proved she could handle both. Her fight scenes were brutal and beautiful. Her comedic timing showed range that would have translated perfectly to Hollywood if anyone had bothered to look. Between 1985 and 1990, Rothrock made over 20 films in Hong Kong, 20 films in 5 years, each one showcasing her abilities in ways American cinema refused to explore. She worked with directors like Stanley Tong and Corey Yuen, choreographers who understood how to shoot martial arts without hiding the performer's skills. Her films regularly outgrossed American imports in Asian markets. Box office receipts proved audiences wanted to see her. Critics praised her technical precision. The industry respected her enough to keep casting her in lead roles. But here's the thing that makes this story so painful. While Rothrock was becoming a legitimate star in the world's second-largest film market, back in America, nobody knew who she was. Hong Kong films didn't get wide distribution in the United States during the 1980s. A few made it to Chinatown theaters or niche video stores, but mainstream America never saw them. So, while she was headlining productions that earned millions overseas, her own country remained completely ignorant of what she'd accomplished. The Queen of Hong Kong action. The late 1980s were Rothrock's golden era, and understanding just how dominant she was requires looking at the numbers Hollywood pretended didn't exist. In 1987 alone, she released 4 films. Above the Law, also known as Righting Wrongs, grossed over $15 million in Hong Kong dollars on a modest budget. Magic Crystal pulled similar numbers. No Retreat, No Surrender 2, her collaboration with Loran Avedon, became a cult classic that's still discussed in martial arts film circles today. Directors started building films specifically around Rothrock's strengths. She could perform complex forms that looked stunning on camera. Her kicking speed was faster than most male martial artists. She had the flexibility to execute techniques that required years of training. And unlike many Hong Kong stars who relied heavily on wire work and undercranking to make their movements look faster, Rothrock's speed was real. Cinematographers could shoot her at normal frame rates, and she'd still look superhuman. The fight choreography in her Hong Kong films set standards that American action cinema wouldn't match for another decade. Watch the final fight in Above the Law, where she faces off against multiple opponents in a courtroom. No quick cuts to hide the action. No stunt doubles for the complex techniques. Just Rothrock executing a 6-minute fight sequence that would have made any male action star's career if it had gotten proper distribution. Critics in Asia recognized what they were seeing. Black Belt magazine in America ran features calling her the most technically skilled martial artist in film, male or female. Tournament competitors who had fought against her knew the techniques she was throwing on screen were legitimate championship-level material. But recognition in specialized publications didn't translate to mainstream American awareness. While Rothrock was cementing her legacy in Hong Kong, the American action scene was exploding with stars who couldn't touch her abilities. 1987 saw Schwarzenegger's Predator, Stallone's Over the Top, and Chuck Norris's continuing dominance in missing-in-action sequels. These men became household names. Rothrock, who could outkick Norris and execute techniques Schwarzenegger couldn't dream of, remained unknown outside martial arts circles. The tragedy deepens when you consider the specific skills she brought that Hollywood desperately needed but refused to use. Rothrock's weapons work was championship level. Her nunchaku demonstrations had won her multiple grand championships. Her kama work was so precise that weapons manufacturers used her in promotional materials. Her sword forms combined Northern Shaolin's grace with Wushu's acrobatic intensity. Any of these skills could have anchored an American franchise. Instead, they were relegated to Hong Kong productions that most Americans never saw. By 1990, Rothrock had proven everything she needed to prove. She could carry a film financially. She could perform action that required no CGI, no doubles, no camera tricks. She had range, playing everything from serious cop dramas to comedy action. She had worked with the best directors and choreographers in the world's most demanding action film industry, and they all vouched for her professionalism and skill. Any rational film industry would have recognized this as a blueprint for American success. But Hollywood isn't rational, it's political, and Rothrock was about to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. America rejects its own champion. 1991. Cynthia Rothrock returned to America, believing the work she'd done in Hong Kong would translate into American stardom. She had the resume, she had the international box office receipts, she had the critical acclaim. She walked into meetings with major studios carrying proof that audiences worldwide wanted to see her lead action films. And Hollywood looked at all of it and said, "We'll give you supporting roles in B-movies if you're lucky." The first insult came from the projects themselves. Studios offered her roles as the tough cop's partner, the villain's henchwoman, the karate instructor who shows up for one scene. Roles that required maybe 3 days of shooting and gave her fourth billing under actors who'd never trained a day in their lives. When she pushed back, when she pointed to her Hong Kong work, and asked why she couldn't lead an American production the way she'd led 20 Asian films, the excuses started. American audiences aren't ready for female action leads. Your Hong Kong success won't translate here. We need a male star to open the film. You can be in the supporting cast. Every excuse was provably false. Sigourney Weaver's Alien films had proven female-led action worked. Linda Hamilton's Terminator 2, released in 1991, became one of the highest-grossing films of all time, with Hamilton carrying significant action sequences. The audience existed, the box office potential was proven, but those were A-list productions with major studio backing. For direct martial arts action films, Hollywood's position was clear: men only. The most painful part was watching who did get opportunities. Jean-Claude Van Damme landed his first American lead role in 1988 with Bloodsport, a film that cost $1.5 million and launched him into stardom. His martial arts credentials? He'd competed in karate tournaments with a record that was later revealed to be heavily exaggerated. His acting experience? Minimal. His box office proof? None when he got cast. But he was male, he had muscles, and he could do a split. That was enough for Cannon Films to bet on him. That bet paid off, and Van Damme became a household name. Steven Seagal got his first lead role in 1988's Above the Law, not to be confused with Rothrock's Hong Kong film of the same name. Seagal's martial arts background was in Aikido, which he'd taught to celebrities in Los Angeles. He had zero tournament experience, zero competitive fighting background, and a teaching style that focused on flashy demonstration techniques rather than combat effectiveness. His fights on screen required careful editing because his actual speed and precision couldn't compare to real martial artists. But Warner Brothers gave him a theatrical release and a marketing budget. The film succeeded enough to launch his career. Even third-tier male martial artists got better treatment. Don "the Dragon" Wilson, legitimately one of the greatest American kickboxers ever, got trapped in direct-to-video movies, but at least he got lead roles with his name above the title. Lorenzo Lamas, who'd learned some basic martial arts for his TV show Renegade, got multiple film opportunities. Jeff Speakman, whose Kenpo karate background was respectable but nowhere near Rothrock's championship level, landed a theatrical release with The Perfect Weapon in 1991. The pattern was impossible to miss. Male martial artists with less skill, fewer credentials, and zero international box office proof were getting opportunities Rothrock couldn't access. She'd beaten most of these guys in tournament competition, or matched their skills at minimum, yet they were building Hollywood careers while she was being offered crumbs. When she tried to leverage her Hong Kong fame, studios acted like those films didn't exist. When she showed them box office receipts, they dismissed Asian markets as irrelevant. When she demonstrated her abilities in person, they nodded politely and then cast someone else. The excuse that stuck in her mind came during a meeting with a major studio executive in 1992. She'd been brought in to discuss a potential role, and the conversation turned to why she hadn't been considered for larger parts. The executive, trying to be helpful in the most condescending way possible, explained that American audiences needed to see men in action roles because men represented strength and protection. Women in action films worked as sidekicks or love interests, but leading roles required someone audiences could believe would win the fight. Rothrock, holding 5 black belts and championship trophies this executive would never earn, had to sit there and listen to a middle-aged man who'd never thrown a punch in his life explain that she wasn't believable as a fighter. She kept working, but the American dream was dead. The industry had made its decision, and no amount of skill or proof would change it. So, Rothrock did what she had to do. She took the direct-to-video roles, cashed the paychecks, and watched her potential get buried in the bargain bin at Blockbuster. Trapped in the video graveyard. The 1990s and early 2000s were brutal for Rothrock. Not because she stopped working, but because the work itself was designed to be invisible. Direct-to-video action films in that era had a specific business model. Make them cheap, shoot them fast, throw them on video store shelves between the real movies, and hope someone rents them by accident. No marketing budgets, no theatrical releases, no respect. Rothrock starred in films like Undefeatable, Angel of Fury, Guardian Angel, Tiger Claws, and dozens more that barely got noticed. Some had respectable budgets for direct-to-video, around 2 to 3 million. Others looked like they had been filmed in someone's warehouse with a crew of 5 people. The quality varied wildly, but the result was always the same. Another movie that would disappear into the video graveyard, rented once, forgotten immediately. What made it worse was that Rothrock was still capable of delivering championship-level martial arts on screen. Watch the final fight in Undefeatable, a 1993 film that's since become a cult classic for how absurdly violent it is. Rothrock faces off against a serial killer in a warehouse, and the choreography, while over the top, showcases techniques she'd used to win actual competitions. Her speed hadn't diminished. Her precision was still there, but the film had no distribution strategy beyond sitting on a shelf next to hundreds of other forgotten action movies. The contrast with her male peers was devastating. By the mid-90s, Van Damme was commanding $10 million per film and getting his face on billboards worldwide. Seagal was making $15 million and playing characters who were always the smartest, toughest guy in the room. Even B-tier male action stars like Jeff Wincott or Gary Daniels were getting better projects with larger budgets and wider distribution. Rothrock, more skilled than all of them, was making a fraction of their salaries for films that got a fraction of their exposure. The industry's message was clear: your skill doesn't matter, your box office history doesn't matter, your international fame doesn't matter. You're a woman in a genre we've decided belongs to men, so take what we give you or go away. Rothrock took what they gave her, because walking away meant letting Hollywood win completely. But every direct-to-video release felt like another insult, another reminder that the system valued marketability over mastery. The real reason Hollywood erased her. Let's be honest about what happened. Cynthia Rothrock didn't fail. Hollywood failed her. The excuses don't hold up under any scrutiny. American audiences aren't ready for female action leads. Linda Hamilton and Sigourney Weaver proved that wrong. Asian box office doesn't matter? Then why did studios chase Jackie Chan for years? She can't act? Most male action stars in the 80s and 90s couldn't act either. They learned on the job, just like she would have. The real reason was simpler and uglier. Hollywood's action film industry in the 80s and 90s was built on a specific fantasy: muscular men protecting helpless women while defeating evil through violence. Female characters existed to be rescued, to be the reward, to be the motivation. They weren't supposed to be the ones doing the rescuing. Rothrock threatened that entire structure. She didn't need a man to save her. She was the one doing the saving. And Hollywood's predominantly male executive class couldn't figure out how to market that. There's also the uncomfortable truth about beauty standards. Rothrock was attractive, but she didn't fit the conventional Hollywood mold. She wasn't tall and slender like a model. She had an athlete's build, muscular and powerful. In auditions and meetings, executives would comment on her appearance in ways that revealed their bias. She's too muscular. She's not feminine enough. Audiences want women who look like women, not like fighters. The subtext was obvious. They wanted women who looked decorative, even in action roles. The erasure was systematic and deliberate. Magazine covers went to male stars. Talk show appearances featured Van Damme doing splits and Seagal demonstrating Aikido. Award shows ignored martial arts films entirely unless Jackie Chan was involved. And when the history of action cinema got written, Rothrock's name was left out of the narrative completely. It's possible to read entire books about martial arts and film and find maybe one paragraph about her, if that. The legacy they couldn't kill. Today, at 67 years old, Cynthia Rothrock is still training, still teaching, and still inspiring a generation of martial artists who discovered her work through YouTube and streaming platforms. The internet did what Hollywood wouldn't. It gave her legacy a second life. Young martial artists watch her Hong Kong films and can't believe what they're seeing. Film students studying action choreography use her work as examples of how to shoot fights properly. Female fighters cite her as proof that women belonged in action cinema decades before Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel made it trendy. She never became bitter about what Hollywood denied her. In interviews, she's gracious, focusing on gratitude for the career she did have, rather than anger about the career she deserved. But the people who know the full story, the martial artists who competed against her, the Hong Kong directors who worked with her, they'll tell you the truth. Cynthia Rothrock should be a household name. She should have the respect Van Damme gets, the recognition Seagal receives, the legacy Chuck Norris enjoys. She was better than all of them at the one thing that mattered most in their genre, actual martial arts. The tragedy isn't that she failed, it's that she succeeded everywhere except the one place that controls who gets remembered. Hong Kong made her a star. The tournament circuit crowned her a champion. But Hollywood, the industry with the global microphone, chose silence. They looked at perfection and said no thanks. They had their formula, and she didn't fit it. Cynthia Rothrock's story is about a woman who did everything right and got erased anyway. She trained harder than her peers. She won bigger championships. She proved herself in the most demanding film industry in the world. She had the skills, the resume, and the box office receipts. None of it mattered because Hollywood had already decided what an action star looked like, and she wasn't it. Today, when people celebrate the rise of female-led action films, when they praise Wonder Woman and Black Widow and talk about how far we've come, remember this. Cynthia Rothrock was doing it 35 years ago. She was leading action films when Hollywood was still putting women in refrigerators to motivate male heroes. She proved the audience existed, proved the skills were real, proved it could work. Hollywood just refused to listen. The question isn't what happened to Cynthia Rothrock. The question is, what would have happened if Hollywood had given her the same chance they gave men with half her talent? We'll never know. But every time you watch a female action star today, know that Cynthia Rothrock kicked that door open decades ago. Hollywood just kept slamming it in her face. If you think Cynthia Rothrock deserved better, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to know that Hollywood's greatest action star was erased on purpose. Drop a comment telling us which forgotten legend we should expose next. The truth won't tell itself.